Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Achieving a Seamless User Experience Through Testing. Before we start, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to interact in today's webinar. We will give you the opportunity to submit questions to our presenters by typing them into the window of the control panel. The control panel is situated on the right-hand side of your screen, and questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar will last for approximately 45 minutes with 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters, Hava Kleiman from QualiTest and Louis Wilkinson from Testbirds. So over to you, Hava and Louis.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Nice of you to join us today. A very short introduction about ourselves. My name is Hava Kleiman. I'm a solution architect at QualiTest. I'm doing QA in QualiTest in the last 10.5 years. In the last 3 years, I've been focusing more about UX testing and solutions. I'm more than excited to introduce our partner, Testbirds, and Louis here.
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you, Hava, for passing over to me there. I've been working for Testbirds now for just over 2 years. I come from a testing background and focus heavily upon project management, agile technologies, and how different softwares can utilize testing to better develop their products.
A bit about QualiTest. A bit about QualiTest. So QualiTest is a pure play company to software testing. We have 4 major locations that our offices are based in. One is in the US, one in the UK, one in Israel, and one in India. QualiTest was formed around 1998 in Israel and got expanded and became basically the world's largest software testing company at the moment.
Yeah, and so about Testbirds. Essentially what Testbirds is a testing house that focuses upon 2 main streams. The first stream is QA, so that's all our quality assurance, and secondary to that we have UX, and that's what of course we'll be focusing on during this webinar today, and user experience. Within those 2 streams we have 21 plus different solutions, and either through utilization of autonomous systems and cloud technologies that we've developed in-house and also externally used, we have our crowd, which is real people, real end users testing real software of today. We'll take a bit of a deeper dive into that later in this presentation, but that's an overview of Testbirds.
So we have a short poll that we would like you to participate in. Basically, please vote if you have any experience with UX and testing in UX. We're just waiting for your votes. It's really exciting. 80% already voted. Okay. I'll give you a couple more seconds to vote here.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like overall the majority of people within this webinar have some experience within UX, which is great for us because it gives us an opportunity to show some of our experiences and take a bit of a deeper dive into UX, and hopefully you can take away some more information than what you came to the webinar with and leave here with a better understanding of what UX is and importantly how it can positively influence businesses and products. So on that topic, What is UX? There are many definitions of UX, and even the term UX itself can be quite ambiguous to people. So UX stands for the user experience. Often within this umbrella of user experience, you have the user design, the design aspects, and also the user interface, and the user's experience overall kind of shadowing through that. The International Standards Authority have came up with the definition that the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency and satisfaction in a specified context of use. That's the formal definition of UX, and if you see the content that we have beneath here, gives you a bit of a breakdown into the parts that go into there. But if we focus upon user experience specifically, what that is that any artifacts, looking at this centered image here, any product, anything that you interact with at all, any artifact that's being created, you have that interaction, then an experience is created from that. That is your user's experience from that there, and that is the output. And really what we're trying to do when we look at user experience is we're trying to better understand how the users of products, how they do experience that journey, and what does that journey look like. Is that a positive one? Is that a journey that is rife with problems and struggle points, or does it fall somewhere in the middle of that?
Basically, a couple of years back, I want to say even about 6 years back, there was a big hype about usability experts. Somebody came into your company, he would come and say, your design is wrong, you should move this button left, you should make this bigger, this is not good. What changes, basically, we don't really need to talk to a usability expert anymore. We can actually go and target real end users. When we do this type of UX research, we can ask the real end users of that app or that product, how do they really feel about it, and why do they really feel the way they do? So you can argue with somebody that has basically a degree of having a usability expert, but you can't really argue with hundreds of your users having an opinion about what they like and what they don't like.
Okay, so what you're looking at here is something that we found to be very powerful for people, especially when they're trying to get investment and allocated budget from senior stakeholders of a company, when you're asking to move forward with a UX approach. When I say a UX approach, I'm actually speaking specifically about a user-centered design. So what we're trying to achieve there is that from the earliest stage possible, you have your user in mind of your development. As Hava just kind of mentioned on the previous slides, the older way of doing this is that companies and designers and commissioned people would come into companies and help to, within the research and development, create a product that they perceive to have value. And maybe they would have done some research into this and some market research, but the stage at which a user would come in would be far later than what we've now come to realize is kind of the optimum time. As you can see from this graph on the left-hand side, when you first come up with an idea, so if you're sat around, you've had an idea, you get a couple of your colleagues involved, and you sit around brainstorming what kind of value can this actually bring. This is the stage where you can implement any changes because you have such a simple, low-fidelity product, perhaps even just a wireframe or notes in a discussion. Any changes that you make cost you very little time, and there's no real financial implications there. As time goes on and as you enter the development phase, going up towards launch, you can see that the cost of design changes skyrockets. For example, if you invested hundreds of thousands of pounds into a new software and you decided, we actually really should test this and see how other users want to use this at the point of where you've already launched it or you're just about to launch it, any major changes that come through there would be so significant to your development costs and the development teams that you would possibly miss your launch stage and you would really go over budget. This is something, unfortunately, that we do still see happen sometimes in today, but with the understanding of the good UX principles and user-centered design, it's something that we're definitely trying to work away from already. So within the user-centered design, there's three key areas to focus on there. One is being early, to focus on users and their tasks. So at the earliest stage, what is the user actually going to be doing? Try to understand from a user perspective what the product's going to do, not how much you think the product is going to affect the market or how it can potentially influence your business. How will the users do that? Define your users at an early stage. Secondary to that is to have an iterative design approach. So to go through and keep keep coming up with new ideas and keep coming through with different iterations. That's the way that they go through to do that. And thirdly, and maybe the most important part, is for empirical, so to have measurements of the experience. So we need to make sure that we can actually measure the experience that people are having with our products there.
So basically, we are testing from concept to release. We are able to allow you to test in each phase of your development. So within concept, we'll go and have a couple of interviews with a couple of basically targeted users that you want to target, and what did they think about the idea. Having full-on interview and getting conclusions about way before you actually develop a prototype or even have a design in place to show off the users. At prototype phase, we can basically do some sort of comparison. If you have a couple of ideas, you want to see what's good, what you should continue with, what your end users think, and basically see what they think about what you already had designed. It goes into development and basically tests basically way before you have a final product, an app or a website. We can test with real conditions, basically in people's houses, on the move, using the real mobile network. And it goes all the way to basically release. When we are doing a release, we're going to do a mix between UX review and full functional, seeing how it's going to work and see how many bugs we can hit on your real app and real product.
Yeah. So as Hava was saying there, kind of this throughout the whole development cycle, what we are trying to achieve now, what has been found to be a really great methodology of moving forward with software development, is to have continuous UX process. So UX not being a consideration that you have at one of these stages individually, but something that you constantly refer back to. And that is kind of calling back to what I referred to earlier of the user-centered design. The user-centered design was an idea that came around kind of towards the end of the 90s, and that was when it really started to become popular, and it was very much, as it states, a design tool and a design method that would really help with the development of your products. However, it wasn't made for software development. Later on, it was joined with design thinking, and a couple of additional ideas came through there, and we started to lean a little bit more towards lean manufacturing, in fact, and towards agile. And that's where we've reached the stage that we're kind of at now, which we are seeing all of the kind of the top software companies have a lot of success with, and our most successful clients, in fact, overall with lean UX approach. And so what that really means is taking a step back from the old waterfall methodologies. We're adopting frameworks that are often orientated around Scrum. These approaches give us a great opportunity to implement changes regularly in short sprints with regular iterations, which we're learning from often, quickly and efficiently, and that feeds into our iterations of our software development. With a framework like this and with a key understanding of UX that is referred to at all stages of the development cycle, we're seeing some very successful companies come from this. So, talking about success, we're going to take a little bit of a look back at perhaps where UX wasn't so great and the evolution of this with a specific product. So on the right-hand side of this slide, you will see a series of images. If we look at the one for 1997, I'd imagine most people on this webinar would remember this here. And so this is one of the first iterations of Microsoft Word. Especially at the time, and still today, Microsoft was a huge player in the software market, and in fact had a real monopoly on the market as a whole. They developed this software here, and they got all their designers together, some very technical people at a time when there wasn't so many technical people in the world. They gathered all of the features that they could think of, like, right, okay, we want to have this Word document tool where we can do everything that we could do with a pen and paper, but even better, and for a lot of these functions to be automated so that we can change our styles. What the result was is, as you see, there's a lot of icons here, and it's very ambiguous to people using the software back then and still now as to what the icons do or are. And what this is referred to in design terms is a Norman door. There's a gentleman called Don Norman who is an American designer, quite a prolific designer who's worked more recently with Facebook and Google and done some really significant work. But one of his points that came out in one of his design books that's kind of stuck with us from a design point of view is if you walk up to a door and there's no sign on it saying to push or to pull, and it has a handle on it that is vertical, you have no idea about whether that will be a push or pull door. And it's kind of a stab in the dark as to if you're going to get that one correct. So his point really being that a product, and a good product that does fall under good usability and that leads to the successful product, is something that from an initial look you can have a takeaway in your head of saying, okay, I know kind of what that does. So with this example of Word, what happened is they went to do some research after they'd released the product, which, as we've discussed already today, that's not the best approach to have with your software development. And what happened was a lot of the feedback they had was quite positive because it was a new product, innovative. People saw a need for Microsoft Word. They said, oh, I'd really like it if I could change the font, or I really would like it if I could add this shape or this text box, and said all of these things that they went back to the development team with. And the development team were really quite furious with it because they were saying, well, of course you can do that. It's here. Like, I'll show you. This is how you do it. And they'd become quite blind because of their organizational blindness, that to them it seemed very easy, but it was very unclear as to where these features and functions could be found. And so there wasn't actually any new requests for features. It was just that people didn't know exactly where it was. So as we go down the picture on the right-hand side there, you see that the ball swung quite heavily in the other direction, and they reduced it right down in 2003 to a really condensed version of what they had. And then kind of the story of the Goldilocks and the porridge, they started to find that a middle ground was in fact much better, and to utilize tree menus and hamburger menus that branched out in intuitive ways so that you would kind of card sort all of these features, so that now you can look at Microsoft Word in its current state, the image that we have from 2016, but I'm sure you're all familiar with the one that we use now in 2018, where if you don't know how to do a certain feature, you can think logically about where you might find these answers and where it may be.
Let's talk a bit about good user experience. Just a bit of background, you can see a lot of flashy pictures on the right. Lonzo is one of the challenging banks in the UK. They basically started as a startup. They had basically pre-charged debit card that you can use. Their intention was to become a bank, which they became last year. They made a really significant change of how you do banking online and how good is your experience. Basically, it starts with something very simple, like when you open a bank account. In big banks or old banks, the ones that have branches everywhere, you need to set up a meeting in advance, basically get a slot with an advisor to basically provide all the evidence you need to open a bank account in the UK. Lonzo did it differently. They decided that they can do it everything within the app. You basically go, sign up, provide all the evidence via a short video of yourself showing your IDs and providing any documents they might need. And basically that's it. You have a bank account. It's within literally less than a couple of hours and you're all set up. Within 2-3 days you get a card sent to your address and everything became way more simple. It gives a lot of things that other banks gives as well, but they're allowing real-time notifications and some understanding of what you're spending each month and on what, and maybe you understand that basically all your financials are going too low too fast and maybe you should watch it. It has online customer service, basically 24/7. You can text a clerk in the bank and they'll respond within usually the hour that you send the message and help you out solving whatever problem or question you might have. It allows you really cool features about collaborating with your friends. Basically, if you ride an Uber, you used your Monzo to pay it, you can go and split the bill with your mates. Just basically invoice your friends, and they basically going to pay you back really easily. Stuff like freeze your card on the spot. A lot of banks actually learn from that, and it's part of a generation gap. So a lot of people tend to lose their card, but they might find it in, let's say, an hour or two because they misplaced it. So it allows you to temporarily freeze your card, and if you actually don't find it, ask for a new card. It's all sort of built around the community of users that exist as part of this bank, and basically they keep on listening, they keep on involving their users about every new feature they're thinking about building, and they actually get real feedback at real time about what they would like to get for their users. How do we target the right end users? We have persona that represents the need, motivation, values, and goals for interaction with your device, application, or website. There will be many personas for each application, which are likely to have different characteristics. We start by listening, asking our clients guided questions about their end users of their apps or websites. We ask the client if they have defined their personas. If the client have defined their persona, we can use the target user journeys to better understanding the need of each type of user, asking the right questions to the right users. If the client does not have any definition, we're here to help. We're providing full consultancy, helping them defining the groups and using the data the clients gave us to drive planning of the testing and the surveys and everything they're interested to see as part of it. We'll make some sort of a draft and target our needed participants group and inform the client about each step of the path to testing. A lot of the times the participant needs to be from a certain geographical area or a certain age group, having certain education background. We will target anything our client can imagine. The only thing that will make time is finding the right people. So basically, sometimes our requests are a bit more complicated than others.
Yeah, so what we're really talking about here when we're trying to find the right end users, it's important to highlight that customers and users are in fact very different. And when you're talking about a product's user group, there may be multiple user groups within that. For example, one user group would be your customers, one user group may be your internal employees, and then one user group may be other sort of invested stakeholders and shareholders that want to be viewing this product as well, all using the same product, all having a different experience because they all have different needs onto that product. So the importance here of breaking down the personas is that we really need to have a clear set idea of who all of these user groups are, and a persona is a great way of condensing that into a short segment of information that we can take forward into testing. Once we have these personas established, then we can really have goal-orientated tests that are built around metrics that can really come out afterwards and drive our development with enforced data. That's the process that we're talking about here, and something that we're going to take a little bit of a further look at on our next slides. So, the participant journey. The purpose of this slide is to really give you guys an idea that are on the webinar, the process of crowd testing. Some people may not be familiar with that here, but if you're thinking this sounds really interesting, kind of being part of a usability study and taking an early look at some products and helping to influence the decisions there, how do you go about it? Well, working for Testbirds, I have a clear view of the way that we do it here, and it's fairly consistent across the industry to my understanding as well. We start off with some enthusiastic prospective participants, so people like yourselves perhaps that are looking to get involved in some projects. The next step there is that you go for a sign-up. During that sign-up, This is where we capture all of your information on there, trying to hit all these different demographic points. Basically, we're trying to get as much broad information on testers as possible, so that when a project comes through and when we're working with a client, when we are understanding their goals with these different personas, as we mentioned on the last slide, we can sift through the net of our potential testers within our crowd, and we can find the people that really are your actual users and they match these personas. And so therefore, they are very valuable and the correct people to test with. So once they've signed up through the platform, in our case it's called the Nest, we then go through a qualification procedure to help educate people as to the way to document reports, to get a better understanding of UX and usability, what is good, what isn't good. For example, we may have a UX report, and one of the first questions might be, once you've landed on the new website, is what's your impression of the website? What do you think about it? And somebody's answer might come back and say, yeah, I think it's really good, and that might be it. And obviously this isn't a great question, although it's nice for us to know that you lean positively towards reaction, not a negative one. We're not having many takeaways there as to how you really feel about it. So what we want to do is have really extensive answers. So we much prefer, and we try to train people and coach them to give more answers like, I really like it. The initial impression I get is, if it's Lonzo, as Hava mentioned, so I can tell this is a banking website that's oriented around banking. I'm instantly knowing what this is about. I like the color scheme. I like the simplicity. I like there's a lack of noise going on. Start to get more technical with their descriptions. Once we have these qualified testers, they then will start to get invitations as we do go through with clients, and then we have new projects coming through. You'd receive an email invitation. Within that email, you would get the deadlines of when the testing would need to be completed, so you can check and make sure you can commit to the work, and also the payout that would be involved. Moving further around the arrow, we have the test phase itself, self-explanatory there, and then through to the expert evaluation. This is our quality assurance to make sure that everything's complete within the report, and we can have a kind of backwards and forth with the tester from a management point of view before we deliver there to the client.
Targeting the right end users. So basically, we already talked about this a bit, but this is more focus of how well we can target the end users. We do have over 300,000 participants globally. It's spread out of over 193 countries. When we talk about demographics, we have 60 different categorizing, but I'm just going to give here a couple of examples. We have gender, education level, income level, age group, relationship status. It could be basically anything that you would define yourself as a person could be under that. All the participants have their own devices in real conditions. So basically either on their home Wi-Fi, their work Wi-Fi, they might be outside using their mobile network. We can target the test within specific geographical area. We had a client that needed to test within a specific city, and basically it was on a mobile network, and that was really helpful for them, the fact that we can find people inside the city to do the test online to see if their infrastructure is working. We can test on very specific, basically cable providers if it's in the US, or basically network providers if you're talking in the UK. We can look for people with very special hobbies. Let's say if our product is designed for somebody that likes scuba diving in the picture, or we had an example with a client that was developing basically a wearable product that needed to basically monitor people health condition. So they were looking for somebody that was basically sweating a lot to be able to configure that product to people that have the tendency to sweat a lot. And basically we can target anything our client really needs. It's only a matter of how long will it take us to find those group of people. Sometimes it's going to take us a bit longer, especially when we have like a very specific requirement, but we eventually always found those people. It's really important that the test is directed to the user the participants have to be related to that end users. There's no point of trying to mimic a user that our participants cannot identify with as part of the test. The target is to have the user that the end client will have. Tests are made as simple as possible, making it available to anybody that is interested to join and accessible to all type of users and not necessarily technical users. Questions are targeting what the user think. It should be really, really clear and really easy to understand. And basically, like the example we gave before, it's not going to be a question that your response is going to be, yes, it's okay. It's going to be a question that will drive as much response as possible, because we would want to have at least understanding of why somebody likes the design of this product.
Yeah, so I think this is also calling back to the real importance of having the correct user for your tests. To give you another example, not so long ago you would have the development teams that are working on, let's say, a website, and this could be a development team full of all sorts of different personas, different users that do not meet the desired end user for the product you're developing, and they would in fact do the testing on there. This would result in a lot of products going to market that are not being sufficiently tested and that are not matched against the user groups that we have there. So, for example, if we had a website that is selling swimwear to people from the UK between the ages of 40 and 50 years old, quite a niche product there, it of course doesn't make sense to have people that don't meet that user group testing the website and testing the product there and giving feedback on their opinion, because their opinion is not valid to the market that you're trying to meet. So you can see the correlation here between the marketing, kind of the segmentation of customers. What we're looking to do with the test goals as well is, yeah, if you've made this website and you want to test it, we need to still be specific. Calling back to what I mentioned at the beginning of the webinars, we need to have metrics in place for us to be able to get tests. So some examples of an actual goal that we could have here is we want our site to be more user-friendly, and we want our users to perform task X faster. So perhaps with this retail site, we want this swimwear site to be more user-friendly, and we want people to be able to sign up to our mailing list and sign up to have an account with us in 3 minutes' time. This is a good goal. This is a specific thing that we can actually extrapolate from the data and we can try to improve on. And then the important thing with the UX and usability is that after we've tested, when we have further iterations, we test to see if there's been improvements on this. What we would do at first is we would take a deeper dive and we would see where you're scoring on these points at the moment. So we would have an overall study. We would get testers, end users to score the usability of the site. So we could have some open questions there, and also we'd have some closed quantitative questions. Then we would take all of the data that we have, all of the results, compile that, analyze that, give that back to the client, and then the client could go away with their development team to improve upon these points. Then the really important stage of our secondary testing to see if the feature developments and the changes to the user interface that we've implemented, if they have positively impacted our goals here, and if we can hit our metrics. And then across a couple of tests time, we can then go to our senior stakeholders and say, through this investment into UX, we have managed to have 85% of users prefer the new design over the old design, or for example, a 20% decrease in support calls to our call center, if that was one of our goals we were doing there as well. These are really tangible things driven by business goals and driven by revenue that will really help organizations get further buy-in into user experience and UX.
I have another example as part of us doing ongoing testing. A lot of the times we can actually notice a trend change. Basically, if we usually get a very positive response on a certain app and all of a sudden the experience drop massively, we can connect that to a certain version saying something changed badly. Let's go and analyze this to understand what did change and why did it affect the user experience badly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a bit about the future. I want to say the future is already here. There is a lot more personalization in the process of how apps and websites are interacting with the end users. I can give an example, Starbucks app. If you have it downloaded and you have a user and a profile and you keep on buying coffees from them, they can actually say, hey, Louis, I can see you're around the corner from the Oxford Circus shop. We have 50% off your favorite coffee. And this type of experience is amazing because not only they know where you are, which is, let's say, a bit creepy, but they also know what is your favorite coffee, and they can actually target a sale for you as an end user. Augmented reality is a big thing. Everybody knows Snapchat. If you don't know Snapchat, there's Facebook filters. I think in every app now you have a bit of, you can take a selfie of yourself and then make yourself be a tiger or a bear, or just put some funny clothing or makeup. It's a big thing now. Everybody like it.
Yeah, I think maybe a bit more broadly, some thoughts from myself that the future of UX is going in a lot of different directions, and it's really an exciting time for the whole industry to look at UX as an industry because of how centric it's becoming to the approaches and the development of not only now products but of companies. Because I mean, the UX is something that it's not just a box to be checked. It really should be a culture that needs adopting and frequent acknowledgement. To give an example from the list that you guys can see there, for the augmented reality, I'm sure most of you remember hearing about Google Glasses, and for a long time it was at least rumoured that this would come out as physical glasses that we would wear, and maybe still one day it will. But for example, on the new Pixel phone, the Pixel 3 has just been released by Google, and they're making the move into hardware, whereas historically they've always just been software. It has features on there where you can hold up the camera and through the lens it will scan what is within the depth of field of the image, and then it will pull it up from different retail stores. So it's a way that people can see a jumper or something somebody's wearing and then scan it, and then hopefully that will be registered through Google, and then they can find it and purchase it directly there. Ways of trying to make kind of the experience for people that are using products much better, and as with most technology, we're coming leaps and bounds with the way that this is positively impacting people.
Let's touch a bit about AI. AI is a big thing. Everybody likes AI. Sounds so interesting and scary, but mostly interesting. Already we have a lot of apps using AI. Facebook shows your timeline specifically on the people you are interested in, your closest friends. You're not going to see somebody you added to your friends group 10 years ago and never interacted with, because what they do is basically take all their big data, analyze it, and by their understanding, they're going to only show you those people that really interest you and not just everybody. Spotify, if you listen to music, it's going to know which type of music do you like, and it's going to recommend you of the next album of the same type of music you like that you should definitely try and listen. We have Tesla with their basically driverless cars that have completely AI about how the car is driving, using sensors, having mapped on the road, complete fleet of cars about being connected, all using AI and analyzing it. We have a lot of GUI-free context. We have Siri and Alexa and Google Now. Basically, we're being able to talk to a lot of devices, telling them what we're interested in. Look pretty amazing. Everything IoT, basically Internet of Things, basically all our devices, stuff like our fridge today can tell us that it's going down empty, and you should go and do some shopping because you ran out of milk.
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that with the future, if we call back to the definition that we mentioned earlier, it's really orientated around effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction. Often the most important decisions that you make in the development of your products through a user-centered approach is the decision of what won't you develop, what won't you do. As we saw from the example of Word, a really feature-rich product is not always the best product. And if we do try to keep in mind the effectiveness, efficiency and satisfaction of a product, we find that the people that are really leading the industry, and that gives us the idea that the people that are going to carry on to do so in the future, are the companies that are creating products with the most streamlined, intuitive processes. These days, if you buy an iPhone or some of the top Android phones as well, the out-of-box experience, calling back to the kind of experiences that we discussed, that is such a seamless process that anybody can pick that up and just establish their phone and bring points over. Previously, looking at the past, this is areas that was very, very difficult, and we're seeing that all of the new technology is just becoming a seamless, easy, enjoyable, pleasing process for the user, and everything is becoming orientated around the user at its heart, which is great to see. So I think,
Yeah.
unless Hava, you have any other points, that was it for the main presentation?
Yeah. We're happy to basically take your question at this time. If you have any questions, please feel free to.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. Thanks so much, Hava and Louis, for a very informative and interesting presentation there. So as Hava said, right, let's get to some questions. So one question I've got here, if I undergo UX research, how can I take this information forward with my product development?
Yeah, so I think that is a good question, and one that we definitely encounter quite regularly at Testbirds. It calls back to having these metrics in place. So in a hypothetical situation, we've done a UX study. We've found out all of this initial information of what's the first impression people have of your site. Do they understand what the purpose is? How do they feel? What are their pain points? What do they like? All of this data we've gathered together, and by itself it doesn't really mean too much until we analyze it. We say, okay, so people struggle to add items to the basket, or it's unclear to them as to where this basket is located. So again, the intuitive menu system. So with that example, depending on the data that we have from the test and from the research that we've done within UX, I think the best approach is to analyze that and to create a backlog, an issue backlog of what you'd like to work through in terms of priorities for what you perceive to improve the experience of your product. This can be validated by how severely the test participants have rated that issue, or how frequently it has come up. So if, for example, the basket is an integral journey on your product, of course, for people to be able to check out, that's really a large risk to your business if that's not possible, and a big drawback on your digital products. So I would imagine in this example that would be up on P1 for the most highest priority to go through. And then you would work through that backlog and through the issue list there, and then retest, and the metrics as we referred to earlier, you'd see how you've improved, and then to benchmark, keep benchmarking, keep doing iterations and go through testing that way.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. How do I know what people say about their experience with my product is true, and is this something that should be addressed?
Basically, if you think about it, people, natural, they tend to make everything prettier, and it's not because they're mean, not because they're liars. It's because when you ask somebody how much you exercise on average, they will usually say, I exercise 2 times, 3 times a week, even though they might be not exercising at all.
Yes, I think what this question is doing a bit really is looking at the actual specific of research within usability there. And what we can talk about quite a bit is confounding variables, and what Hava was just leaning to there is we have attitudinal and we have behavioral. So exactly as Hava said, if you ask somebody how many times they work out per week, they say 2 or 3, but in actual fact, the truth, their behavioral actually would maybe be more like 1 or 2. So what we would try to do really is, depending on the goals of the test, we would have to pick the correct research method. So for example, if we did a sit-down interview and we're at an early stage, a low fidelity version of your product that we'd like to try to get a feel for if there's a perceived need and if your perceived users actually need this. We'd get a lot of qualitative feedback that's all attitudinal. Whereas if we were looking at a product that's already established and we want to understand how users use this, rather than having an interview and asking them, how do you go about doing this? What do you do? Like something like a gym, in fact, and just kind of following somebody around, by just following them and by doing sort of studies with that regard where you don't intervene, then you can get much clearer data sometimes. So I think the answer to the question is it depends. It depends as to the questions that you've been asking them, but it really depends as to the goals for your test.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Are there any other questions there? Just take a look.
There is a question about any new initiative and works that you can share. Basically, we're introducing here, if you haven't knew about this, we have a full partnership with Testbirds. We do a lot of projects with them to basically analyze our client needs and get user experience feedback. I can share with you a couple of examples later. If you need to, just reach out to me. I'm pretty sure my details are on the webinar.
Yeah, and I can add those to the email afterwards.
Yep.
Details and Louis as well.
Okay. Any other questions there, or is that all for today?
I think that's everything. The webinar's now concluded. So thank you very much again to our presenters, Hava and Louis, and to our viewers for joining us today. If there are any questions that we haven't answered, we already have your email and we'll reply after the webinar. So just a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be available on demand within the next 24 hours, and we'll email all the information about that to you. So in the meantime, we look forward to welcoming you at our next webinar. Until then, goodbye.